Hi everyone, it's Raina. So this video is for those people who have their natal Chiron in the third house and or have it in Gemini, which is the ruler of the third house. So it will manifest in pretty identical ways. So Chiron is the wounded healer, an unhealed wound that you may have that creates pain for you in a certain sector of the chart or area of life. Gemini is the ruler of the third house, and the third house involves teaching. Well, it's the mind, so it can involve any pursuit of the mind, how you obtain information, how you absorb it, processing it, how you communicate things. It can be teaching to others. In terms of teachers in your life, it can be the elementary school years and the situation that you experience there. And it's also the media, there's other things, siblings, brothers and sisters, extended family members, neighbors, your local area is Chiron. So the unhealed wound that can really be prevalent with this may revolve around the issue of self-expression. Before I continue, I want to give a shout out to the website that I compiled this list from, jessicadavidson.co.uk. I do paraphrase things, so there's always the danger when you paraphrase things that you may take it, you might distort it a little bit. So I want to let you know that I'm not saying this verbatim, and that whoever this woman is, I'm sure she's an astrologer, these are not her exact words, and so I apologize if I'm distorting anything even slightly. But this is an unhealed wound around self-expression. And, what came into my mind while I was compiling this list is how some parents say to their children, children are to be seen and not heard, or there's an expression, children are to be seen and not heard. Authoritarian types of parents, and there are cultures that really support that kind of authoritarian behavior from parent to child, where you don't talk back, and you really don't. I mean, it's actually considered, beyond the pale to do that. Because the adult is seen as all-knowing, I guess, and it's like how you don't even have the right or the ability to challenge this adult. And I'm saying that's not how I believe, in case you can't tell. So in those kinds of family dynamics and structures, a person like this can feel acutely this sense of being stifled, I would say. And, the person who owns this website and wrote this said self-expression, but that was the thing that came into my mind, because I think that does happen. And if you're a certain sign like Gemini itself or Sagittarius, where especially, because I'm a Sag and I think about speaking my truth and being outspoken in that way, it can be very painful to have this type of practice going on in the home where you're not allowed to speak. And it can probably lead to a lot of other adverse reactions to this muzzled way of living. But it can just be that the person doesn't have, their thoughts are jumbled maybe. And again, I mean, that can be because of something that's going on in their home life that is making their nervous system just going haywire, so they can't think straight and they can't talk straight. And there's even a theory that ADD and maybe ADHD, since that's related to that, could be a form of post-traumatic stress disorder from the family of origin. And I think that's right on the money. I really do. I think it's very hard to think straight when you're dealing with a lot of chaos, emotional chaos in the physical environment and the home life. So that can be just that the mind isn't working in a very constructive or productive way for whatever reason. Maybe there's, like I said, an emotional underlying reason for that. Others may not hear you. Like you might feel maybe your voice is super soft even when you try to, project it. That you feel like you're kind of constricted in your throat chakra, or something. I think it's called the Vishuddhi, the fifth chakra. Yeah, I didn't think about that in terms of the chakras. Vishuddha, Vishuddhi, however you pronounce it. And the other thing that is a really big one that I can see is something to do with learning disabilities, learning difficulties. This can be in the form of, let's say, dyslexia or dysphonia. I don't know. I think that's when you do not hear things as they're being said. I am not sure. I didn't study learning disabilities specifically, but I did work in schools and I do have an education background. And I worked as a teacher's assistant in special education. And so that experience helped me to understand myself and the kind of things that I think I went through. I believe I had ADD, and that was before there was even a term for it. And so it's easy, even if you're intelligent, to feel a kind of a blow to your self-esteem when you have a hard time with certain things that are connected to learning, receiving information, and also, processing information. That's a different thing, because you take it in, and that means you have to have it not be distorted, and then you have to process it, and you also have to communicate it back out. So if you remember going to the blackboard and having to put something down and you don't get it, you don't understand it, and the humiliation and the whatever, these kinds of things can chip away at somebody's self-esteem. And then people wonder why students drop out of high school. I think a lot of times now I have a totally different view of that, a very sympathetic view of how upsetting it must be to be in the typical public school setting, which is a one-size-fit-all model. And nowadays, there are many, many young people, and I'm talking about 20 years ago when I worked with special education students. They did not look different on the outside, and yet they had severe learning disabilities. And now I can't even imagine what it's like 20 years later. So these kinds of things are enough to create a chain of events that spiral somebody down into the life that they don't want to lead. It can lead to maybe early pregnancy, low self-esteem, kind of aimless in life, not really, caring if they have this unplanned pregnancy that can really muck up some of the dreams that some young people have, when they're in high school. Just joining a gang, feeling like feeling like they have no abilities, because of learning is everything when you're a certain age. And there's a pressure to get it. If you're a slower learner, doesn't mean that you're not intelligent, but you're not grasping it as quickly as somebody else, and it's go, go, go. That can chip away at your self-esteem. So that can lead to drug abuse, alcohol, drug abuse, these kinds of things. So I think that, Chiron, Saturn, Neptune in the third are things that a lot of people might not think are big deals, but this is in that foundation, those foundational years, in the early the elementary school years, and that can be massive. I actually have done a video on Neptune in the third that has been getting a lot of responses from people, because they probably are starting to connect the dots about like what happened to them. And actually Chiron has been linked to Pisces, and therefore you could say Neptune, in terms of some of the influences or the effects that it might have. Pisces is associated with suffering and these kinds of crosses to bear, if you will. So anyway, very, very interesting. And so other things that can happen is that because of this, you may feel that you're unintelligent. You may, just to put it bluntly, you may feel stupid compared to other people. You may look at other people and see that they're getting it quickly, and that makes you just feel even worse about yourself. And that can carry into adulthood very easily. The terrible thing about that is that it's kind of like if somebody, has a religious upbringing that feels very oppressive, and then they turn away from God altogether because they're so turned off to that type of treatment. That's terrible. That's the last thing we want. And learning can be so wonderful. It's a never-ending pleasure for me, and I know that for some of you who even have this placement, that you found some way to heal from that, and then you could, enjoy the life of the mind, which is fantastic. Now, the third house and Gemini, the ruler of the third, can be mundane knowledge. So it's not so much like when you go to college and you're learning all this heady stuff. This is more for practical application, so it can be training that you do as well. But the other thing that this can involve is the media, news. So gossip feeds into this, what's the latest? And speaking of that, this may be a problem for you. And this is, she had a list of stuff for Chiron, and then also for Gemini. And she kind of put it under the Gemini list. But because they're, connected, I'm going to just combine it. This idea, Gemini can be a gossipy type of an influence or energy, and two-faced. Gemini is a double sign, the twins. And so the person can be very two-faced. And what they a lot of times do is hoover. That's one of the things I paraphrased. Hoovering is a term they use in narcissism discussions when you're trying to ferret out information about other people. And that's really not very cool when you're doing it. So then you can spill the tea, as they say, kind of like spread the dirt about somebody. But first you're going to go to the horse's mouth and try, or you might go to other people. Oh yeah, what did she do? What did, da 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 da, so you can tell somebody else. And this is in order to increase your self-esteem, but it is a very low energy, obviously. It's not right, But I'm not one of those people that think that if you talk about someone who isn't present, that's all that's automatically gossiping. To me, there's a malicious intention and tone to the conversation. I can't imagine never talking about a third party. I don't see that as malicious. And it almost would be self-centered not to, that just care about yourself. I don't know. That's just, I'm kind of editorializing, I guess. But yeah, doing things like that, which is kind of negative communication. Now, in terms of how you can do this with yourself, habitually destructive thoughts. Here's something that I put OCD about trivial information, which is kind of funny. That they said something like obsessively gathering information that makes your mind muddled. I was thinking, man, that sounds like me, and I don't have this placement. But yeah, I would say OCD. I said OCD about trivial information because I do think the third house is more, it's kind of disposable. The news is disposable. And if you're like a news junkie and you always have to hear the latest, or social media, that can be the third house. And that is very true, is that it gets your mind in a lather and you're just, it doesn't allow your mind to really function at its highest level because it's kind of stirring up the monkey mind, very ADD, And it's also not enhancing your life if you're just like trying to or even if you are reading things that have educational purpose, but you're just overdoing it. It can even be, to me, escapism, where you're just using obtaining knowledge or the obsession of needing to research a certain topic as kind of like spiritual bypassing or what have you. And to me, spiritual bypassing could be construed as psychological bypassing. So, in terms of when you're having discussions, it may be hard for you to really talk about things that are emotional. You may experience resistance to that. And so you may keep everything superficial. And again, gossiping and stuff like that can really come across as, you can do that as a substitute for a meaningful, intimate conversation. It's funny, when I said gossip, I said, man, do I sound like I come from Chicago? Sometimes people ask me what my accent is, and it's like, I have a Chicago accent, but I was born in the suburb. I was born in Chicago, but I grew up in the suburbs, and it's like, I don't know where I got this Chicago accent from. But these kinds of things. And you know what? It's funny because as I'm talking to you, whoever's listening to this, oh man, I'm getting caught up in my own little world. But that is another thing, like being excessively wordy, even though she didn't mention that. If you have like verbal diarrhea, being excessively talkative, it can be problematic. If you've ever caught up with somebody and they just start talking about themselves, it's not just about narcissism, but it's almost like nervous. It's like this thing where and again, a lot of it can be these trivialities. We're talking about what they did, but it's never about the emotions. So that might be connected to that, where there's that resistance to talking about emotional topics, and then the person may go on and on and on. And then at the same time, you have a hard time articulating your feelings. So even if you went into therapy, you might have a hard time explaining why you're upset about this or that. you might be able to describe, it's almost like, because Gemini is an air sign, so it's like this intellectual thing where the person can intellectualize what's going on, but they have a hard time really getting in that heart chakra and feeling, and then translating that feeling into words, or those feelings into words. There's like a disconnect there somehow. So, another thing that's very interesting is there can be a mind that is too, this is how I paraphrase it, too rational or too woo-woo, which I thought was kind of funny. Because the rational side, if you've ever talked to somebody, maybe they're, they work in science, the field of science or something where they really believe in everything that is part of the 3D reality. And so anytime somebody brings up something that is about spirituality, it almost like freaks them out, because they're like, that's not science, that's not, rational, that's a myth, that's woo-woo. And I have perceived such people as very, very narrow in their scope, and they may have, a genius IQ. I don't know if they have a genius IQ, though, because I think that people with genius IQs are pretty well-rounded intellectually, and they can accept the possibility of things. I don't know. But anyway, they're just very, very geared towards certain things, and anything that is outside of that they can't quantify and they can't label, they dismiss as being unimportant. On the other side are the people that have an ungrounded sense of what their mind is processing. So the upper chakras, the fifth chakra is the communication center. The sixth is the third eye, which is ajna, and that is where you get that intuition and the guidance that is coming from somewhere beyond the proof that is before you. And the seventh chakra is the seat of wisdom. And so these are not grounded. These are not in the material world. And so people who live in their upper chakras tend to come across very flaky, very absent-minded, because their minds, and they can be very intelligent, but they're just not paying attention to practical details. Examples, not seeing where you're going even, and kind of, you're so like spaced out about thinking about something else. And it's funny because Albert Einstein, I'd like to see his chart if he had Chiron in the third house, because he was put in the like the slow for slow children at one point. I don't know if it was for specifically, I think it was for specifically math, of all the subjects that he was put there. And I heard this story that one time he went to the library to return a library book, and this was when he must have already been well known at that point, and he was teaching at an Ivy League school or something like that. And the teacher, or the librarian, opened the book, and she said, "There's a $10,000 check in here." And he was like, "Oh, that's where it is," or something like that. And he was totally spaced out. So that doesn't help you function in the world. Now, obviously, Einstein didn't have a problem, coping with those tendencies and still being able to, maybe have a minor impact on the world. That's sarcasm, in case some of you, Chiron and the third people didn't get the joke, and you're taking it literally. That might be part of what happens, that you take things literally, and it's hard for you to get or to detect sarcasm. But yeah, things like that. These are more important than we realize, these traits. And another thing is problems with siblings, painful relationship with siblings. The third house can be your brothers and sisters. If you were raised by a narcissist, they set one child. Sometimes there are multiple golden childs, but they set them up as the golden child that is supposed to be worshipped. And then they have to have the black sheep or the, what do they call that? The scapegoat. And maybe you're the scapegoat, and maybe that put some kind of fracture between you and your sibling. It fractured your relationship because you resented them for being favored. And as a child, you don't know that that dynamic is coming from the parents, and that the parents are the ones, or parent that is doing this. You just blame the sibling, and you may even be mean to the sibling or have conflict, just be resentful of him or her. There can be breathing problems when you have this position. Pranayama, I would say, she didn't mention this, but I'm just saying, as a remedy for that, because, you know, I don't want people to think that, oh, you have that's it, stick a fork in it and it's done. No, you can do something about it if you want to. You can heal, and then you can help other people. Pranayama is a form of breathing meditation, but it has physiological benefits. It's not just for any kind of perceived spiritual benefits. So that might be helpful. You never know. Obviously, check with a medical professional when it comes to, asthma, any breathing condition, because I don't know. I've never heard yogis talk about what happens if you have asthma and you try pranayama. Is that dangerous? I'm sure it might be healing, but I don't know. And that's a good question. I'm sure, people who have asthma, it must be pretty terrifying to have something like asthma. Because that sensation of not being able to breathe is just, it's awful. But I do feel like, there are things that we can do, and even dietary herbal. Again, you have to research and consult people that have specific knowledge in that. So let's see what else. There was something else that I wanted to say, and I can't see it here. Maybe there wasn't. Maybe I covered everything. Okay, well, I think I'll leave it there. I hope that this resonated. If you would like a private reading, the link is below. Take care. Bye.